Welcome to my meat rabbit colonies. I have 2 setups, 2 runs, and I'm going to talk you through why we raise meat rabbits and what their setup looks like exactly, and all the details in between for raising rabbits for meat. We started raising rabbits because we wanted another sustainable source of food on the farm, specifically because of our dogs and 2 cats. We've got 2 large dogs that are about 100 pounds each, and we've got 2 cats, and we feed them a raw diet because that's what's best for their health. And I'll do another video on how to feed your dogs or animals raw in the future, but there was no doubt that it was the best possible decision for them. We did realize quickly, however, that the cost of feeding raw was pretty expensive. Even if you were buying meat in bulk and doing something simple, just like ground beef, the costs were really expensive. And around the same time, we had 2 pet rabbits. And these were our first animals on the farm when we first moved up here, other than just our dogs and our cats, because we just wanted to have something. And they were great pets. They were super duper sweet, and we had them in a rabbit tractor that we moved around the land. We collected their poop for fertilizer, and it was still work. Aside from like the efforts that we give our dogs and our cats, we quickly realized that this is not a full cycle sustainable system. And when we had already switched to raw, one of those rabbits had accidentally escaped and gotten into our pasture and met their end with our livestock protection dog. And it was at that point that we realized this is a sign that we need to move in the direction of meat rabbits. So we started off with just 1 colony. And when we first started, we knew that we wanted to do colony style instead of caged rabbits. And we had read a few different books, which I'll link down in the caption below. But a few different books that really convinced us that raising in colonies was not only the most humane way to raise rabbits, but it was also the easiest and fairly maintenance-free way to raise rabbits. And a lot of people will ask us when we raise our rabbits in colonies like this, they'll ask, well, what about disease and parasites and things of that nature? But the truth is, with good husbandry and herbs and a good quality feed, we've been able to manage that really well. And we'll talk more about that later in the video. So we found this setup on Wayfair, and it was listed as a chicken run, which I'll also list in the caption. And we basically went to some Facebook groups and found locally 2 females and 1 buck that were unrelated that we could buy to get our colony started. We had an advantage when we got our first 3 rabbits because the lady that sold them to us was able to breed them with another buck. So that meant that the babies that came from those 2, we'd be able to keep the females and use for females to breed with our 1 buck. So we do have 1 buck per females in this 1 colony. As we have raised rabbits colony style, we have recognized that there is so many advantages aside from just healthier, psychologically content rabbits. They actually support one another in caring for their young. Sometimes they'll nurse some of the babies or the other babies that didn't belong to them. We've even seen our buck laying in the nesting box side by side with a birthing mother to support her. And our buck is super sweet and is a wonderful father and very protective of everybody in the colony. So now let's take a look at the structural setup for how we got our habitat situated. So the first thing to know with these runs that we bought is that it came with this chicken wire material that goes all the way around, as well as I think 1 or 2 tarps. And we did get an extra tarp so that way we could cover the entire run and keep it nice and dry. And then we reinforced it with 2-foot 1/4-inch hardware cloth around the outside of the perimeter, and we secured it all with zip ties. The next thing we did is we took the 2-foot 1/4-inch hardware cloth and we put it on the inside of our run. So that way 1 foot would be on the outside and 1 foot would be on the inside. And we did that to prevent them from having a direct way to dig out right along the edges, as well as predators digging in. So inside the rabbit habitat, we do a deep litter method, which means that we basically add hay on top of the existing hay as it gets soiled, as it gets wet, and then we'll take all of this hay and rake it up and put it in the garden. Now you'll notice that they do make their holes inside the run, but the key is that they don't make them next to the hardware cloth, and when they do, we are putting some sort of obstacle or rock that will stop them from digging out. And we're out here every day, so they don't like dig deep enough or fast enough overnight before we can get to this point. But we love the fact that they can enjoy their natural habit of digging holes where they want. I'll show you some of their favorite spots. Yeah. Some of these holes they have used for nests, which have been very successful. Some of them they just like to have to get to the other side and have a place to go. We did make this little mound in the middle just so they could do exactly that and dig holes, have little hiding spots, have just sort of another kind of fun play area. And you can notice that we've taken logs and other supplies to give them entertainment and make it feel like a natural habitat for them. We have these galvanized steel cans here that we use to store their feed in. We feed them New Country Organics rabbit pellets. It's the cleanest brand of feed that I could find on the market. And what I love about raising rabbits is if we needed to, we could easily feed them off of the land. We could feed them with grass clippings, a salt mineral block, scraps from the garden. But that takes work and time that we don't currently have. And so we still feed them by the pellet and then give them plenty of treats whenever we have those extras from the kitchen or the garden. I like having these cans with their feed in the runs because it just makes feeding them that much easier. And then what we created was what we call the Bunny-O-Matic. And this is a great little feeder station that we made out of PVC piping. And the reason why this is handy is because we don't want to just leave feed out. That will attract rodents. And so we only try to give them the amount of food that they're going to eat in a single day. And in the mornings, these buckets are completely empty and they're all hustled around here and will jump on us and act crazy if we try to feed them any other way. And so we can open this.
And we pour it through the top.
And we pour it through the top. We also have these little boxes that we made of just scrap wood and hardware cloth to put on top of their feed, because oftentimes when rabbits eat, that's when they poop. And so this is all a way to keep the poop kind of together in one spot, keep them off of their poop, which helps with parasite management. And then of course we've got their waterer. That's actually a chicken waterer, this blue container here. And we have that hanging from the center of this tent. So currently we have 5 females in here. And the one black buck. And what we have also is their nesting boxes. Now, there's quite a bit to know about the nesting boxes because sometimes they do nest in the ground, and there's some advantages to that. The advantage to letting them nest in ground is that it's the most natural environment, and when we leave nature to do its thing, it often works out the best. And so what I have found is that when they nest in the ground, I can't check them, the mamas are checking them, but there are interesting signs when there's a baby not doing well. Once when we had an in-ground nest, we had one baby die, and obviously there was no way I could check and know that, but one day the mom had opened up the nest, and so I knew that it was a new nest because it was a hole she was digging for a while, and then it was covered up, and then one day it wasn't covered up. And when I went down, I could smell the odor of decay of a baby rabbit that had passed. So I was able to get my arm in there, feel around, and find the dead baby rabbit and pull it out. So they really have an instinctual way of doing it. I also like it when they nest in ground because then you don't have to clean it. Any urine or poop just kind of soaks into the ground so it doesn't smell. The only thing I don't like about the nest is the fact that I can't get in there and manage and see what's going on. And that brings me to these nesting boxes. These nesting boxes are great because we can check on the babies, make sure everybody's doing okay. This one here is about just a little bit about maybe 3 or 4 weeks old. They haven't quite weaned, but their nest is open, so mama's ready to let them start coming out. The other big advantage and disadvantage to having these sorts of nesting boxes versus in-ground is that if we ever get an influx of rain, and they're on higher land right here, but if for some reason there's so much rain that there's flooding, the in-ground nests that are naturally made by the mamas can flood, and we had that happen to us recently. And there was nothing we could do about it to save those baby bunnies. Whereas these nesting boxes are protected from rain, or protected from flooding, I should say. So let's take a look how these are built. For our 5 ladies, we have 4 nesting boxes. They obviously don't all have babies at the same time. There is a dominant mama, and I think that's the one there, and she controls the breeding cycle. So she basically will split up any breeding that's happening between her and any of the other ladies, like Pancake, all dependent on when she wants to breed and the cycle of everybody else and when they can care for each other. It's just another reason to raise rabbits in a colony is that there is a natural order of things, similar to like a pecking order with chickens. And the ladies control the breeding cycle, and so they're not all having babies at one time. Sometimes they might be really close together, but they are managing their own natural reproductive cycles, which means that you get more rabbits by letting them just be together. These are their nesting boxes. They're just these black and yellow totes that we drilled 6-inch holes into and added this 6-inch corrugated piping into. It's this flexible piping here. And we like it with the ridges because then it's easier for them to kind of grip as they go in. And we have tried to get them to go as level to the ground as possible, so it feels super natural, as if it's like a burrow that one of them would have already dug. And but they've kind of been uprooted sometimes, because occasionally they will dig around them and like pop them up. We even had a litter in there one time. But this is what it looks like when their nest is open, and we've been checking on them quite a bit. And on the inside, we have layered soil, pine bark, and straw to make it as natural and comfortable as possible. Also, we add the soil, so that helps collect any urine as the baby bunnies grow. And then we add the straw, which is the softest bedding material for them. And this is an example of when you know that a mama is about to have babies and she's covering up her spot, declaring her nesting box, or when babies are inside. And there happens to be babies in this one that are less than a week old. That is what they call popcorn, and they do that naturally in order to get to the top and nurse from their mama. So you'll notice all the fur around them. Like I said, these are maybe about a week old. And the mama will pull her fur either a couple of days before she has babies or right when she has babies, and that becomes sort of their bedding.
Aren't they cute?
Are those your babies, Pancake? Their eyes haven't opened yet.
I'll touch one.
Okay. Oh, I bet you that's the mama, and I bet she is going to nurse them because her little babies are exposed right now. Yep, she's going to let them have a little nursing. So usually the rabbit will go in here once at nighttime to nurse her babies. And so you can check in the morning to make sure that their bellies are big and they've had milk. But they'll come in at nighttime, nurse them just like this.
They're so cute.
And then leave and cover up their hole, and then the mamas will be gone for the rest of the day. Let them be, baby.
Cute.
But the babies will stay in their nesting boxes until about 3 or 4 weeks, and that's around the time that they'll also wean, more like 4 weeks. So the mama will open up the nest when it's time for them to come out. They'll come out, they'll start trying some pellet food or whatever other food that we've got going over here, like treats and things like that. And then once the babies are big enough, maybe around 5 or 6 weeks, we move them to their grow out pen, which I'll show you next. How often can you expect for the babies to have bunnies? Well, technically they could have babies every month. The ladies are experiencing rapid hormone changes right after birth, and they usually want to reproduce and mate pretty quickly after birth. That's when they want to get pregnant again. And so during the months of the year that are pretty temperate weather, whether it be spring or fall and even winter time a little bit, they will mate every month of the year, but usually take breaks during extreme temperatures, like extreme heat or extreme cold. And so when we wanted to grow enough rabbit meat for our dogs, we were aiming to have anywhere between 5 and 9 female rabbits reproducing, and that would potentially give us enough rabbit for the year. But what we didn't realize when we were doing that math is that they can take months off. So it's completely up to them when it is ideal for them to reproduce and have more babies. Each litter could be anywhere from 5 to sometimes even 14 kits or baby rabbits. Oftentimes, first-time mothers will experience some death. It could be because they don't know what they're doing. They might cannibalize their babies, and they may just have other issues. And so that is sort of a piece of it that you have to be prepared for. We do try to not handle newborns for at least the first few days, just so that if we do have any first-time moms or any nervous moms, they know our scent, but we trust that they have their process down naturally and perfectly, and so we just kind of leave them to it. But I do like to check those nesting boxes just by opening it up and seeing if there's any dead ones. Usually if there's a dead one, they're kind of moved out to the side a little bit. So when we first started this video, we talked about how we're able to control disease and parasites with good husbandry and herbs. Well, good husbandry has a lot to do with systems like this, keeping their food off of the ground, keeping them off of their feces as much as possible, watching for the ground, and assessing whether or not we need to layer more hay for the deep litter method, because the deep litter method is beautiful as everything kind of decomposes on its own. Rabbits, aside from tunneling and creating their little burrows, they're not scratching all of this around like chickens, and so everything is sort of kind of breaking down very nicely, and we can always scrape it up and then use it in the garden. But in terms of parasites, what we have found are a few different tricks for maintaining parasitic load. The first thing to understand about parasites is that we all have them. There's no avoiding parasites. If you walk around barefoot, if you have pets that you snuggle or give kisses to, you've got parasites. Parasites are somewhat symbiotic in nature because they not only eat the good in our guts, like the nutrients and vitamins that we need, but they also eat the bad, heavy metals, toxins, things of that nature. So in general, I am not afraid of parasites, but we do use herbal dewormers for our family, for all of our animals on the homestead, including the rabbits. The most common parasite in rabbitry is coccidiosis. And that is a parasite that lives in the liver. And so when you butcher your rabbits, you can check your parasitic load simply by looking at the liver, which I've done in my processing and butchering rabbit video you can check out. There may be signs in younger rabbits that have not developed a strong immune system to fight them off. And if that's the case, you might get a really lethargic rabbit that is just not really moving. It could also be where it's slowly dying and slowly breathing. Those are signs of coccidiosis. There are different parasites that can affect your colony, but there are a number of different anti-parasitic herbs that you can use as a broad spectrum. For example, wormwood or black walnut. And there's a few different companies that we've tried out for parasitic herbal formulas to deworm our colonies, and I will include those in the notes below. You can mix it in their feed with some molasses so it sticks to their pellet feed. But what we have found to combat specifically coccidiosis the best is apple cider vinegar in their water, as well as willow tree limbs, leaves, bark, and thyme. And so whenever we've noticed an infection, we usually go to those first. And when we do that, we will get within a week a completely coccidia-free liver. Now you might notice that we've got some grow out still with the breeders. And that's because they've been too fast for us to catch them. But about at that size, like 5 weeks once they've weaned, we do like to move them to the grow out colony, which I'm going to show you next. Now, if you wanted to start small like we did, you could just start with this one colony, and technically you could have your grow outs with the breeders. The reason why we wanted to go ahead and get a separate space for them is because we want our grow outs to get pretty big, 5 or 6 pounds when we process them. And at that point, when they're about that size, they could start breeding themselves, which means that their dad could breed with them. And while inbreeding is somewhat natural in the wild, we're trying to avoid that unless we're very specific about what we're breeding for. We haven't even done it yet, but that's kind of where we stand with inbreeding. And the last thing you want to do is process a grow out that's been impregnated and has babies growing, which we have not experienced yet, thankfully. And thankfully because we have switched them over to their own separate setup. When we have them in the grow out colony, we do pay attention to if there are males developing, and you can check between a male and a female from birth, but you can also notice very obvious signs as they mature, like thumping, or if you're picking them up and handling them, you'll see that the testicles have dropped. And those grow outs we are usually processing first for all the reasons that I've mentioned already. But let's now take a look at the grow out pen. So there's not too many differences here. We have the same feeding system. We do the deep litter method. We didn't do a hill for this one because they're not in there as long of lives as they're going to be in there. And we don't have the same chicken waterer because we couldn't find it, so we just add waterers to the side of the cage. But we've got their tin cans here with their feed. And in here they also have more tunnels for them to play with and hide in. And you can see kind of the different ages that we've got here. And so just recently, our rabbits have really started multiplying more as the weather has gotten cooler. They definitely took a break when it was warmer. And so at this point, we're basically deciding when to process based on size. This one happens to be one of our favorites. This is little sweetie bun that we've bonded with and will be staying with us in the grow out pen indefinitely. But we are looking to see which other ones we need to process based on size, and the rest of them just hang out in here. Sometimes they dig around the edges, in which case we will put some boulders or rocks or things to get in them too. But they don't really dig quite as much as the breeders do, probably because they're not really thinking about breeding yet. But this is one of the reasons why I really love raising rabbits in colonies, is because they're so sweet with each other. They're such social animals, and it's really wonderful to see them just so relaxed with their ears down and having a good time. So it's been about 8 months of raising rabbits this way, and it's just been super successful. We've had plenty of mistakes and deaths along the way. Some bunnies dying of coccidia. We at one point had rats coming in and eating their food, which meant that we needed to give them less food and also set out rat traps. And the only other thing I'd say that I would do at this point to change things is maybe add more nesting boxes, but also I've noticed they poop a lot where they drink water. So we're probably going to add some more of these boxes to where they drink water as well. So that is the full setup of our rabbits and how we care for them and manage them in the colony setting. If you have any questions, please make sure to ask them in the comments below, like and subscribe to this video so that way you can find more awesome videos popping up in your feed about sustainable homesteading. Good one.